Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the educational stage for our 11 o'clock session, which is created by our U.S. Hispanic Council. Marcelino Miyares of D2H is the leader of the Hispanic Council and has been for now, 2 years? I think, 2.5, 4? Time flies, man.
Extended my term. I'm going for a third term.
Anyway, we appreciate you being here for today's session. The clicker. And we hope, as always, appreciate the support of our educational sponsor, Blue Water. They actually have a new message for you at this one. If you've been here before, you've probably seen most of their messages, but this one's different, so let's see it.
Familia Ramírez.
Deje el drama para las telenovelas.
Pero ahora no tengo que jugar con dolores. Me pongo Gembana y el dolor se va.
Thank you for the relevant video, Blue Water. Well done. As noted, our brand chat, Creating Success in the U.S. Hispanic Marketplace, we're very fortunate to have two great brands in debtdotcom and Anhelo on stage, as well as Telemundo. Federico, right here, is making his third appearance at a PDMI event, and welcome back. Mario, Jacklyn, I believe first-timers for us on stage, so welcome in. I'll let you guys introduce yourselves, and we'll take it from there. Thanks.
All right, well, thank you for giving me another chance to do things right. So my name is Federico Garza. I lead research and insights for Telemundo Enterprises here in Miami, so I'm kind of local. No, I'm happy to be here just to talk more about Hispanics. And as a Hispanic myself, I love being working in a company where caters to this demographic, and I hope that I can share with you some information that is valuable to you today.
Hi, nice to see everybody. My name is Jacklyn Lopez. I lead the brand strategy for our Hispanic Medicare Advantage brand, Anhelo. It is a brand that was specifically crafted for this community, so really excited to share some insights with everybody.
Morning, my name is Mario Cordon, Chief Marketing Officer at debtdotcom. Marcelino needed a third person, so I got invited.
Thank you for that. All right, well, good morning, everybody. This seminar is titled Creating Success in the U.S. Hispanic Market. And what we hope you get out of it is some insights on what currently, in this very fast-changing business, what is currently working in the Hispanic market and what is not, and that we still have a lot to learn. The Hispanic market, from an advertiser investment perspective, is still way behind how much gets invested in English. So we're sort of late adopters on a lot of technology because that's kind of where our clients have us in the Hispanic perspective. But there's a lot that's working, and we're learning our way through success. And also equally important is how to scale. Right? There's a lot of testing going on and a lot of things that work initially, but scale is really the big challenge in the Hispanic market, particularly when we get into the digital world. So that said, next slide. We want to start with just sort of off the cuff, and I think Federico, this is you. As the research guru, what is the expectation in the growth of Hispanic media for 2025? And this is all media. All media,
absolutely. So let me just say, I'm the guy who is supposed to tell the truth at Telemundo, right? So, and that means that sometimes they think that I'm like the pessimistic because I have to raise all the challenges and everything. But on this one, I'm actually extremely optimistic because I've seen over the last years and decades, and I think we should expect to see over not just 25, but over the next few years and even decades, a continuation of very strong growth for Hispanic media. And this means different things, right? So there's like at least 4 dimensions where we can expect to see growth. So the first one is demand, right? And again, I've said this before, Hispanic audiences are already big, very influential, and continue to grow at the fastest pace, right? Today, Hispanics account for almost 20% of the US population. This is expected to grow to like 25% of the US population over the next couple of decades. Actually, Hispanics are driving half of the population growth in the next 10, 20 years. And that means, again, more people consuming more media, more products, engaging with brands, right? So they're actually spending even more time with media, right? Obviously, some platforms are seeing more growth than others, and I'm going to get a little bit more into that in a second, right? But that's, again, tremendous growth in demand. The second one is then you see also a tremendous growth across different platforms, right? So expansion of content and media across many platforms, digital, social media, traditional, and you see that that is transforming access, right? So audiences have more access to content in many, more places and around the clock. The third one is the companies are expanding their investment in Hispanic media, right? For example, a few weeks ago, Netflix announced that they're investing over $1 billion in Mexico to create content for Latin America and actually for audiences around the world, and so that's important investment, but it's not the only one. NBC Universal, for example, this week we're celebrating our 7th anniversary of Telemundo Center, and for those who don't know, we have a beautiful building here in Miami where we produce over 4,000 hours of live content every year, right? It used to be 3,000, now it's 4,000, right? So you think about that, there's like 75% of the content of the day is produced here in Miami, it's live, right? And so other companies are also expanding their investment in content, in Hispanic content. And then the last point is also the ad spend, right? And this is where probably we're still seeing the biggest gap, but also the biggest opportunity. Because as I mentioned, Hispanics are almost 20% of the population. They're about 12% of the economy, of the US economy. And there's some fun facts, like if Hispanics were a country, we would be the 5th largest economy in the world, right? So we represent 12% of the US economy, but we only represent about 6% of the ad spend in the country. Now, fortunately, companies are realizing that they need to engage and invest more with Hispanics, and so this gap is shrinking, which means that the investment, the ad spend investment, or the advertising investment is growing faster than for general market. And so again, just to recap, right? Increasing demand, increasing in production, in diversification of availability, where the content is, and then the investment of the brand. So again, how to say, tailwinds ahead, right? So,
Good. Okay, next slide, please. So this is for Mario and Jacklyn, no particular order. It's a two-part question. So first, what media channels, and I'm not referring to linear, just in general, what media channels have been the top performing, and what do you see evolving going into next year, and as Federico suggested, in the future? And then related to this, are there any media or marketing channels that you feel that are not being capitalized on in your particular business, or what you see generally? So ladies first.
Great. So yeah, I mean, I think by the nature of Medicare and the audience in general, we see a lot of strength in linear. So, it's one of our core channels. About 70-80% of our media spend is within linear. Again, this is a 65 plus audience, so that's where our audience is right now. But in terms of what's on the forefront for 2025, I think, and what we're hearing a lot in this conference is we're focused on making CTV work. We're acutely focused on making it work for us. And being in the Hispanic marketplace and within the 65 plus, we have a couple layers that are kind of pitted against us, right? So we're slicing our audience down because of the age, and then we also have the additional layer of what's available in Spanish language. So That said, with the performance marketing, we're working with our partners to really focus on this strategy in the years to come. In terms of what's not being capitalized, I mean, I think everything, right? I think this is the purpose of this panel is the Hispanic market in general, but we do see a lot of success and strength within our digital as well. So there's definitely a lot of room for growth where I think we could push it further. But I think Hispanics are really over-indexed in almost every channel, every platform. So if you're not in it, you're not taking advantage of really the powerful demo that this is.
Yeah, so for us, first question, very simple, real multi-channel marketing. So linear TV, Facebook, TikTok, a lot of Google, Bing, all of that stuff works very well for us. The second question is a little bit more tricky. What could be some underutilized channels? Instead of giving you anecdotal evidence, let me try to build a little framework for you, right? Your choice of media in Hispanic marketing depends on three things. Number one, two things. Who do you want to target? What do you want to accomplish? It's that simple. The first part is a little bit complicated, right? Who do you want to target? Three things you have to take into account. Generation, right? Older generations behave very differently than young generations, right? My wife's consumption habits on media, very different than my two kids, like extreme difference, right? Second one is what level of, and I'm making up a word here, bilingualism are you interested, right? My wife, predominantly Spanish speaking, different targeting than my kids, predominantly English speaking. I'm kind of in the middle, Spanish, a little bit of English, different mixing, right? So you have to take generation, bilingualism, and the third one is cultural nuances, right? So, and I'm gonna completely oversimplify here just to build a framework, but if you want to build some cultural nuances, say Cuban Americans in Miami, very different than Mexican Americans in Texas, right? So that's the who do you want to target? And your choice of media is going to depend on that, right? The second one is what do you want to accomplish, right? Is it just performance marketing, low CTA, branding, or do you want to establish some cultural authority around your brand, right? You have to build that out in different ways. So let me give you some examples just to answer the question directly, right? Let's say you want to target my kids, right? Young boys, they love gaming, English-centric, but they like Hispanic culture. Well, maybe you should consider gaming platforms, Twitch, things of that nature, right? You want to target my wife, Telemundo has some great deals. I heard 20% discount, great opportunity there. All right, a couple more examples, right? Let's say you're interested in something that's more business servicey with Spanish-centric people. WhatsApp. WhatsApp is phenomenal for that purpose, right? And the last one that I'm going to share is, let's say you have a brand, you're trying to get into the Hispanic marketing, but your brand is not naturally associated with Hispanics. Maybe consider Latino influencers. Great way to build authority around the culture and also, just trust in general. So everything depends, right? Going back, who? It's not a monolithic. Think about generation, language, culture, right? So language is important, but culture is king. And then what do you want to accomplish? And if you keep that framework in mind, you can go back with your colleagues and try to find what works for you best in that context.
You bring up a good point about the regional differences. I've been in this business for 40 years, and we always used to sell the idea that it's one language, it's one culture. And yes, there are nuances regionally and from country of origin to country of origin, but if you were going to buy anything network, you need to speak to everybody at the common denominator. And there are nuances in what you can do. But given the proliferation of new media and geo-targeting and in any Facebook campaign, you're going to produce hundreds of assets in a year. You might as well take advantage of very real differences. As you brought up, Cubans in Miami are different even. I grew up in Chicago as a Cuban in Chicago, very different. Never mind Cuban to Mexican to Argentine to Uruguayan, calling out Nicolas. So that's come back into play, is the ability to get much more nuanced in the communication. It's a creative challenge, and you got to balance a lot of things, but it's a good point, I think, that we're coming back to that. And then I have a question that's not in the books for Jacklyn, but Anhelo is a brand that was developed for Hispanic. What opportunity did you see that prompted that?
Yeah, so we actually started with just an unbranded Medicare space, and I mean, it just grew exponentially, and so we were putting all this budget into kind of the red, white, and blue, what you see in traditional Medicare, and we realized we were leaving dollars and really a return on investment on the table. So it was a collaboration between OmniDirect, the agency, and then the business, which is Transact, to really craft something specific for this community. So we have Spanish language from top of the funnel all the way down, a Hispanic marketing arm, which I think is a really important component to it. So it's a deep understanding of the culture, the language, the community, what are the nuances, what matters when you're talking about something as important as your healthcare. And just in comparison, to give you some data, we see up to 10% or a 10-point difference in our conversion metrics. We still run our unbranded, but our unbranded converts 10 points less than this brand. And then in terms of our placement, our persistency, we just see massive lifetime value of these customers because, and I think we say it all the time in these kinds of discussions, Hispanics are loyal to brands. When you get their buy-in and our buy-in, they'll stick with you. And so that was one of the opportunities we identified with Anhelo.
And it's paying off?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So the incrementality of what the market can generate is there.
Yeah, and we see, they behave differently, right? And we see there's a difference in the audiences that call, our regular kind of Medicare unbranded versus the Anhelo. They're asking for people they're seeing on the spots. They're asking to talk more about Anhelo because they believe in what we're doing, right? Because we're catering to our community.
Yep, clearly a good case history. And that's a good segue to the next slide, which is what is key to generating and enhancing customer loyalty. And it ought to be obvious, right? How do you keep a customer? It's not even an art anymore. It's almost a science, right? But unfortunately, at least in the campaigns that I manage, that the companies are not activating all of the touch points in Spanish that they have available to them in English. They're not using their full toolbox. And even so, Hispanics are loyal because of what Jacklyn just said, because of the brand and everything else. So that said, and this is a question for Federico and Jacklyn, what can companies do to build on lifetime value? Yep. And I want to preface it with one point. Because the Hispanic market is younger in general than the general market audience, we have a longer lifetime to bring value to any different, right? Some categories are what they are, like Anhelo, right? But most products, most services, most subscriptions, most anything have the potential to have close to 50% more lifetime value from that initial investment because just pure demographics. So take it away, Federico.
So let me, because I'm in research, right? I like to start with a case study and with a little survey. So, who in the room has heard of La Casa de los Famosos? Okay, the 2, 3 people, 4 people. Okay, about 10% of the audience. Okay, so let me tell you what it is. So La Casa de los Famosos, or celebrity house, right? Roughly translated, it's a kind of like Big Brother, right? But in Spanish and with Hispanic celebrities. Right, and when I say celebrities, I mean actors, singers, social media influencers, former Miss Universes, like, again, people that are very well known in the Hispanic community in the US. And so we bring 20 or so of them, we put them in a house with no access to the outside world for a few months, and you can only imagine the level of drama that they can, that can build inside that house, right? So We have cameras on them, kind of like Big Brother, right? So 24/7, right? And so people can see what's happening inside the house, again, around the clock. Again, you know the concept, but now this is with, again, the Hispanic flair, right? And so this is our most successful show, our most successful non-scripted show, right? Our most successful reality. Right now it's on the air, so if you wanna just check it out. It's Monday to Friday from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. and Sundays also 7 to 10. So 8 hours of content a week. And if that's not enough, there's a couple cameras that you can watch on Telemundo.com around the clock, right? So 24/7, just in case you don't have enough from those 18 hours of content, right? So and sorry that this is a very long introduction, but there's a reason for that. So why has it been so successful? And these are the lessons that to me, speak to the customer loyalty, right? And the audience loyalty and customer loyalty. So the first one is we bring people that are relevant to them, right? And to all ages, because again, there's some people that are known to, by 20-year-olds and some that are known by 60-year-olds. So that content is relevant to them, is live, actually live, and so everything that is happening in the house, it's timely and relevant to them, right? Also, we have a true, and I know there's another question about omnichannel, but there's a really omnichannel strategy behind that show, right? So we have the linear, broadcast show. We make the show available on streaming platforms, Peacock and our Telemundo app and some things on YouTube. And then we have the cameras, right, that extend the experience. We allow voting, so people can vote through their phones and actually influence who stays in the house and who leaves every week. And we're on social media, Instagram and X and all the Facebook. And so people create communities around this show and they engage, right? And they talk about it. I still remember after the first season, we had, when the first season ended, I still remember reading people virtually crying. I don't know, maybe literally crying over the end of the show, not because they were losing the show, but because they felt they were going to lose their friends and their community, right? The people that were interacting. So what are the learnings? Relevant content, right? Relevant message. Culture is key for Hispanics. And by the way, language is one of the key elements of culture, right? More than Mintel reported that almost 60% of Hispanics are more likely to engage with a brand that they perceive as connecting with them culturally, right? With a culturally relevant message. And they're 2 times more likely to talk about the brand, learn more about the brand, buy products from the brand, and then refer or recommend the brand to their friends when they see that the message is culturally relevant. The other lesson is to make the content or speak to them across all different platforms. Again, you can't go through just one platform anymore, right? You have to go through linear and streaming and social media, and all complement each other. It's not either or, right? Some people were afraid that if we made the show available on Peacock, they were not going to come to see the broadcast. Quite the opposite. The more they watch on streaming, the more they came to the linear show. So you have to make your message, your product available across all the channels. And the third one, very, very important lesson for us, right, is you have to involve the consumer or the audience. It has to be a dialogue. You need to give influence and power to your consumer to shape, right, in this case, the content, right, our show. They were to some degree in control of the show. And so the same way here, it can't just be something that you deliver, right? So it has to go both ways. And to me, when you have these 3 elements, then it's proven that the loyalty is going to be higher for your brand. Again, there's the Mintel study, there's a Nielsen study, there's different studies that show that when you engage with them. Actually, I'm going to plug our sales team right now. If you go to together.nbcuni or nbcuni.com, you're going to find our sales website, and you're going to find tens, if not more, of case studies of how brands, when they incorporate these elements, are having tremendous success. So,
Jacklyn, I saw you nodding your
Sorry.
head.
Yeah, well,
Stole
no,
all
and
your time.
I think
On the last point.
Fede said a lot of what I was going to say, and I think that's been key. No, it's fine. I think we can share the experience, right? I think that's been key for the success of Anhelo is really, I think, and maybe something you didn't mention is the commitment to it from a brand perspective.
Very
I think
true.
We see a lot of brands kind of see that there's value in investing in this market, but maybe want to dub a commercial or do a couple ads on Facebook, and the Hispanic consumer and all consumers, right? We're savvy and we get it, and we see right through that. But what I think what's been key to the success of Anhelo is that commitment to it, right? So we have hundreds of Hispanic, Latino agents speaking to these consumers in their language. We have our customer experience team in Spanish, Hispanic marketing team. So there's a whole commitment across multiple channels, but also different levels within the organization that are specifically catered to this community. So that reflects, like I was saying before, into our conversion, into our profitability. So, in culture and language, of course, but also being committed to that.
You can't just show up for Hispanic Heritage Month.
Exactly.
Right?
We were saying, you can't, not a Cinco de Mayo, test. It doesn't work that way.
Mm-hmm. Or every 4 years with FIFA.
Right.
Marcelino, may I add one small point?
Of course.
I think it's also important measure the loyalty. Measure it between the traditional Anglo segment and the Hispanic segment. And I bet you're going to be surprised, right? So if you use NPS on both segments, I would venture to say that you're going to see slightly better numbers on the Hispanic segment.
Yeah.
Yeah, we see it too in clients who have auto ship or subscription programs. We see that Hispanics typically tend to stay on 15 to 20% more time. So if general market is 6 months, Hispanic is 7 to 8. If it's 2 months, it's around 3. So they stick, despite the fact that these clients aren't really doing much in Spanish to keep them, but they're loyal to the brand. If it works, they reorder. Okay, next slide, please. So this is the $64,000 question in our market. It's all about attribution, right? So now that e-commerce has come into the picture, TV still generates a lot of e-commerce business, but it gets messy when you want to suss out Hispanic from general market e-commerce and general market Amazon. And so the question, and I think this is Mario first and then Jacklyn, how does e-commerce attribution, or how might it be different across media channels? How do you differentiate English from Spanish or Spanish from English? Are you sourcing across all marketing channels? Are you looking at first touch or last touch? And what do you do with all the in-between? So, complicated question. Maybe you can make it easy.
Thank you for giving me such a difficult question.
Good luck.
Look, attribution is always wrong. Everywhere I've been, every single company I worked for, attribution is wrong. It's never right. It could be fairly right, but it's never right, right? So attribution is whichever way you set up things. So you have to be very cognizant of that, right? Because if you didn't set up attribution correctly, then either you're overspending or you're leaving money on the table, right? Now, how do you go about it? Look, we could have a 3-day seminar on attribution. Let me touch on the big points. Number one, let's start with the easy example, right? Your company basically runs TV and search, right? That's a simple case. Very complicated case, your company runs every single media option in the market, different worlds. Let's say you're in the easy category, right? If you're only attributing to TV the phone call and whoever goes to your landing page and its last touch point or first touch point, you're leaving money on the table. What do you do? Okay, Easy example is you can use some rules of thumb, right? For every dollar that you see from TV, there's another 50 cents, another dollar somewhere in the system. Those are real numbers. I've measured this over and over 30 years. Sometimes it's 50 cents, sometimes it's $1, or in between. Start with a rule of thumb. Start on the low end and say, maybe it's 50 cents, and bake that into your media buy. Look at the results. If you're making money, more money, you make the right decision, right? If you're not, cut it back down. But I guarantee you it's not zero. There's a spillover into search. Let me move to a more difficult scenario. You're running Facebook, TikTok, TV, direct mail, everything, right? Now you have, and you're doing English and Spanish, right? You need to get it right because Spanish tends to be more responsive than English in almost every media, right? So you don't want to attribute that incorrectly. What choices do you have? You have market mix models. They work very, very well. They're expensive. You either outsource them or you have a couple of PhD guys in the nerd room, right? And just let them do their stuff, right? But they can get it pretty right. I can tell you I've made some big changes based on market mix models at Office Depot, Kaplan, K-12. We always made more money following the market mix model than not following it, right? So the message is always the same. What you're attributing to TV on a direct basis, it's completely understated. Another option you have is geo-testing. You don't need to hire a bunch of PhD guys, just a couple of analysts. What you do is you build two groups of DMAs that behave kind of similarly, right? You don't want to do New York City versus Oklahoma. That ain't going to work. But kind of similar DMAs. You keep one at baseline. You spend the same amount. You heavy up on the other one. Let it run for 2-3 months and measure the change in sales, right? This one went up 3%. This one went up 10%. 10 minus 3, you made 7% lift. And that's how you make the decision. So those are some easy things to set up, but in general, Hispanics tend to respond a little bit more than non-Hispanics in my experience.
I would take your 50 cent to $1 range and say start with $1 in Hispanic.
Agreed. I've seen cases where it's more than that, and I was blown away, right? So we had cases where we built a market mix model. The market mix model was saying, look, it's about $1. We do the geo test, and lo and behold, it was 1.17. But don't leave money on the table. Attribution is always wrong.
Yeah, I think we have a couple layers of attribution, but and like I said before, we're pretty focused on linear just by the nature of our demo. But we've been in conversations where it's, hey, your CPAs is just not hitting where we need to be, and at the end of the day, if you're not factoring in attribution, you're going to see that impact your other channels. So what Mario illustrated when it comes to just the correlation between linear and search, right? So we see if you pull back budget on linear, you're going to see a hit on your search. And you know, in some cases, we see our linear impact our digital channels up to 20 to 40%. I mean, it's a big range, but there's a lot that we see driving from these channels. And so, you know, when we have conversations about planning for quarters or planning for months, we're factoring in attribution into our allowables, knowing that, you know, all the channels are talking to each other. And I think Fede touched on it as well. The community component of it and that kind of multi-touch is huge. So we see it across, you know, Meta, across all of our digital, our display and whatnot.
Good. Next slide, please. This is Federico. So what are the challenges in the omni-channel marketplace? And I want you to focus more on the streaming side of your business. Are you seeing success from an audience perspective? And to the extent that you can, are you seeing success from a sales perspective?
Yeah. So, I mean, I just talk about La Casa, right? La Casa de los Famosos as an example of what a show can do when you have a true multi-channel strategy. And by the way, I forgot to mention that it's not La Casa, for example, is not just our most successful unscripted show, is the most successful reality show in Spanish language TV, and it's also the most successful on social media regardless of language. So it's actually higher in terms of social media activity than shows like American Idol, who's been, on the air for decades. And so this, again, talks to the level of success than you can have when you have a true multi-channel. But there's also, again, a lot of challenges, and I think for now going a little bit to the sales side, right? As advertisers, brands probably have at least a couple challenges. Three challenges. So one is fragmentation, right? And fragmentation not just in terms of where things are being consumed, and so to the points that we made, where you have to use all these different channels, but also the fact that, and Marcelino, you mentioned it, Hispanics are not a monolith. There are some differences based on location. There's some differences based on age. There's some differences based on national origin. And so sometimes it can be tricky to navigate a little bit of like what those differences could be and how you need to adapt the message according to the where, the who, right, and all those things. So this is where I keep saying there's people that can help you navigate some of that, can help you make sure that obviously you don't have major blunders, but also to make your message more effective. So that's one challenge. Another challenge sometimes is measurement. And again, attribution, as Mario said, it is never right, right? Maybe it's always a little bit right? But it's challenging. The data, it's imperfect. The measurement methodologies sometimes are behind, right? Traditional companies like Nielsen are struggling to keep up with all the different channels. And then you have like now a bunch of new companies providing data that could be very good or not, right? And sometimes it's even hard to know how good the quality is, but you have all these things. You have first-party data, third-party data, zero-party data, like all those things, and you need to cobble all them together. Now, again, there's some good examples. Again, another commercial, right? Go to together.nbcuni.org. You'll find about something called the One Platform. That's something created by NBC Universal, where we help advertisers with their campaigns, and we provide three things. We provide, with all the data that we have across all our properties, we provide an understanding of the audiences and segments, right? We are able to activate because we can reach those different segments and audiences, and then we can measure the success, right? And again, we're bringing a lot of data together. There are agencies, obviously, that can help you with the same, right? And so, but you need to cobble all that. So that's another challenge. And then just to reiterate, the cultural part, right? You have to be authentic, because, right, you can't just show up twice a year. You can't just like take an ad that just like translate it just like this, or even worse, like just put it on the air, right? Like in some cases may work, but you have to be mindful about it. You have to be intentional about when it's okay to use one language or both languages, or right. You have to know why you're doing that.
Okay, next slide, please. This is the second to last, and this is about how success in Hispanic translates to budget allocation. So we're all conscious of the fact that we're severely underinvested in as an industry, despite case history after case history of success and the hows and the twos and the whys. So I'm going to pull an audible and add Mario to this, so the three different answers. So how does Hispanic success impact budget allocations, right? Is it a zero-sum game, or the more Hispanic succeeds, the more blank of a check you have to sort of step on the gas?
Yeah, I think the way we place the question, how do we make if you have a fixed budget, you might be leaving money on the table, right? You should always, if you have a fixed budget and your performance campaigns are working, you should always push against upper management and say, I need more money, because it's working, right? Otherwise, you're leaving money on the table. So that's what we do at my company. That's what we've done at previous employers where I've worked. There is essentially no budget. As long as you can prove that you're acquiring customers at the right CTA, given your lifetime value, keep spending more, right? Now, you're going to reach a point of saturation. Please make sure that the world is not linear, right? There are diminishing returns as you spend more, and you have to be cognizant of that, right? A little bit more sophistication on top of saturation curves is the fact that you shouldn't read, let's say you started with, let's make the example easy, $1,000 and everything's working. So you dial up and you go $2,000, right? Always ask yourself, just on the incremental spend, did you get the right CTA? Not on the average of all of the spend, but on the incremental spend. But if that incremental spend, we call it on the margin spend, if that marginal spend is working for you, keep pushing. That's the way we operate.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the same thing for us. And I think when the pushing on the upper management is a big thing, and being able to show that incrementality is driving action at the right cost. I think, you're more able to get budget as performance improves. And like I said, I think the return on the investment and the lifetime value is something that really helps pad that, right? And give a little more patience to the investment on the front end.
And just to round up the answer from my side, as we've been doing that, our percentage of Hispanic market in the budget has been increasing, right? The entire cake has been getting bigger, but the slice of the Hispanic market has also been getting bigger. Basically.
I mean, I would just add again what I said at the beginning. When you look at Hispanics representing half of the growth in this country for the next 20 years, if you're not actively investing and engaging with Hispanics, you're like missing half of the opportunity, right? And I think, to reiterate Mario's point about incrementality, right? I used to be in radio, and I would always say, like, look, you can spend $1 million on TV, or you can spend $800,000 on TV and $200,000 on radio, and the same spend, you're going to reach more people. It's the same with Hispanics. You can spend $1 million general market, or you can spend, half and half, or whatever percent, right? 80% and 20% to be fair to the population proportion, right? And you can probably reach more people when you allocate some of the spend to Hispanic media, Spanish language media, and platforms. Recently, I was actually presenting in an internal meeting. When you think about NBC Universal, again, as an example, if we reach 15 million Hispanics on any given week, right? Half of that is through Telemundo, and half of that is through the English language networks, and the overlap is like 10%, right? So if you're only spending money on one of the two, you're missing half of your audience, and your investment is not going to be as efficient. So it's not a zero-sum game. You can be more efficient. You can diversify the right way and put your message in different places, and ultimately have better results. And again, go to together.mbcu.uni.com, and you'll see like a gazillion examples of people that have 2x, 3x return on their investment when they diversify and follow the best practices that I mentioned. And I'm not in sales, but they're the ones that pay my valet parking, so I could be here.
Okay, the last question. This is for all three of you. Next slide, please. We're going to have a little fun with this one. So we've talked about all the reasons why you should be in Hispanic, right? We're a Hispanic marketing community, and it's obvious. The key question for you now is why or when shouldn't companies invest in Hispanic?
Look, there's one good reason, right? Let's say you truly do not want to target the 5th largest economy in the world, worth $2.8 trillion. Don't play there, right? I know that's not the case, right? Everybody wants a share of that, right? So you have to ask yourself, what do I have to do to be effective at playing there, right? Because the opportunity is huge, right? Like, I mean, what else do we want, right? A large market growing at 25%, extremely responsive, extremely loyal. What am I missing, right? Like, why? Oh, okay, maybe I can't execute. No, of course you can execute, right? There's plenty of Hispanic talent in the market that you can hire for branding, analytics, copywriting, creative development, right? All of the elements are there. Our job is put together the right team, put together the right tools, and go for it, right? Because the payoff is very, very big and getting bigger.
Yeah, I don't think it's a why, it's a when, right? And to your point, it's are you going to execute? And so what is your commitment to it? You know, in our case, if we were just running ads in Spanish and then the phone rings and, you know, you have a few people who can answer the phone call, you have a few employees who speak Spanish, right? So we're spending all this ad spend, we can't convert them, that's different. So it's all about, to me, the execution and the commitment to it and being able to scale it. But yeah, I think it's a when, and when's the right time, and are you ready to dive in?
I love that, the when. Yeah, 'cause
Yeah.
I think you're right. I used to be in retail many years ago, and obviously we want people coming through the stores, except when our product sucked, right? If our product was really bad for you know, that season, then we didn't want anybody crossing the threshold of the door, because then they would see that the product sucked and they would like be turned away of the brand. So I would say a little bit of that, you know, for the when. Like if your product sucks, if your product is not ready.
Marketing technical term. Yeah.
I'm being very technical right now, right? Very technical. If your product, if your brand is not ready to engage with Hispanics, again, in a relevant, meaningful way, if like you have like no, again, capabilities for some Spanish, even, and by the way, Hispanics are very forgiving. Like if you just try, they'll give you a lot of credit for that. But like if you don't want to try, if you're not like you don't want to make any effort, you just want to bring people to see that you're not trying, then that's probably the wrong know, time to do it. Otherwise, again, you know, you're going to be missing a lot of opportunity if you don't try. And again, I think this is where like there's a lot of professionals and probably you know, in the audience too, that are ready to help you and your brand in, you know, making that effort.
Yeah, and see the blind spots, right? Because you don't even know what you don't know, and there's so much nuance with it. But there's a lot of people at the table that are, you know, excited about this demo and know how to make it work and have a lot of success.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the two most common objections that I see are, one is bandwidth. I think you brought it up. We don't have the ability. It's going to be too much effort. We don't know how much we have to invest. You know, I think it's lazy, but let's call it bandwidth to keep it politically correct. And the second one is we're already reaching them, right? Because now the studies are saying that there's more native U.S.-born Hispanics than there are foreign-born. And that first generation, that second generation, they're watching more English language TV, but to the point that you just brought up, you know, there is an overlap, of course, but that overlap is still, you know, low double digits. So there's a huge part of the market that you think you're reaching, you're not reaching.
Yeah. So, sorry, can I just very quickly, something came to mind. So there was a couple studies a couple years ago, one by Nielsen, one by University of Southern California, Annenberg School of Communication and Journalism, and both kind of like agree that, so representation of Hispanics on the screen, it was at about like 19-20%, which kind of aligns pretty good with the population. So we're like, oh, thumbs up. But if you actually read the fine print or like went a little deeper into the study, then you realize that if you excluded Univision and Telemundo, right, the two major Spanish language networks, that representation fell to like 4%. And again, I'm not trying to criticize, you know, anybody else, but that just shows that, again, you need both sides. You need to be mindful. You need to go again and invest on, you know, Hispanics through Spanish language media, because otherwise you're missing. Like just as expecting that you can just go mainstream and engage with this community, it's not going to get you the same results. So,
yeah. Marcelino, anyone that's saying we're already reaching the Hispanic market, that might be the case, right? But we want to be good marketers, right? We want to reach the right message with the right cultural tones. Language, you might be reaching them with English, but are you reaching them with the right cultural tone, right? Language is important, but culture is king. And to the extent that you reach them with a better message, something that's more culturally relevant, obviously the response is going to be much higher, right? So that's another reason to do it right.
Yeah, you can be reaching them, but
you
is it
selling?
resonating and are they responding to it? But I would say there's an unduplicated audience that a lot of people don't tap into.
Okay, well, in the words of Bugs Bunny, that's all, folks. Questions?
No hay tiempo para más.
Audience questions. Anyone have a question?
Hi, so this is kind of a comment for Mario. Hi, nice to meet you. My name is Shira. So a bit of my background, I have a company that does attribution and marketing mix modeling. And I wanted to talk about what you said, that attribution is always wrong. So I believe it's depend of the approach. So for example, if the approach is based on IP addresses, and as you know, let's say, I think around a third of the US households use VPN, of course it's going to be problematic because the IP addresses is masked. There's also other issue with IP addresses related to privacy, but now I'm talking about accuracy level. Now, if the approach, and this is called a deterministic approach, if the approach is probabilistic, which is with a model itself, it's depend of the statistical approach. Same for marketing mix model. My background is data scientist. I can tell you that you can build a marketing mix model that's really not good, and one that can run for years. There's many rules on building a statistical model, and if you know what you're doing, the accuracy should be there. But yes, I agree with you. Sometimes you are companies that don't have enough statistical knowledge to create those, and it can happen. So,
Yeah, I agree,
you.
right? So look, when I say the attribution is always wrong, it's from a philosophical standpoint, right? It's just a way to compel people to take a hard look at it and make sure that you're making the right decisions, right? You always have to triangulate, right? You look at the market mix modeling. Does it make sense? Look at geographical testing. Do these two things, are they consistent, right? It's a journey, right? What I'm trying to say is, don't leave money on the table by going last touch, right? To go to your probabilistic standpoint, the chances are very high that you're leaving money on the table, right? But I love the probabilistic mindset, right? All we're trying to do is stack the odds in our favor, right? We're gonna make some mistakes along the way. We learn, we adjust, but just don't underspend, don't overspend. Try to build a model that works for you. Some people hate models, like statistical models, right? And that's fine. There's other options.
Other questions? Anyone? All right.
Mario, you said you were using WhatsApp. I'm curious, can you give us some examples potentially in how you're using that channel today?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that you can do with WhatsApp, right? There's actually campaigns on Facebook where you can target people who use WhatsApp. That puts you right on target with that segment. From the customer service side, it's a great tool for inquiries, right? You do a lot of organic posts on whichever platform you like the most. People can start replying by WhatsApp. We see high levels of engagement on that back and forth, right? That back and forth. And we feel that if we didn't have that option, we would be missing out on a lot of very transactional opportunities with our customer base.
Hi, everyone. Do you think that there's a risk in advertising in Spanish if the product is only in English? Do you think that there would be customer loyalty lost there if up through the entire process everything is Spanish, people answering the phones are speaking Spanish to them, then the actual product is only being offered in English?
Well, the ideal thing would be everything in the right language, right? You want to get to the right language to the right person at the right point, all the time, not even at the right point in time, all the time, right? So I would say, yes, be mindful about advertising in Spanish to someone who doesn't speak Spanish. But that's not a very difficult problem nowadays to solve, right? Like on Facebook, you select your language, that's easy, right? A lot of streaming platforms allow you to target on content only. There's some that you can target language and content. But yeah, you don't want to advertise in Spanish to someone who speaks English and it's going to transact in English. That ain't gonna work very well.
I think also it depends on what the product is, right? If it's like some how-to in an actual product packaging, I think that's a little bit different than when someone's making a big decision in their life, maybe something about their debt or their healthcare choices.
Good point.
Right? That language is a huge component when you're making those decisions. One, because some things can be complicated and they get lost in translation, but I think it really depends on where you are and what kind of product it is.
Yeah, like a retailer, right? Like Office Depot can advertise in Spanish. It's not like their store is in Spanish, right? Like that's not a problem.
Yeah, I would say that 90% of the products on the air have not translated or transcreated their packaging at all. And if it's a huge concern, you could always build it out online and provide a URL that they can engage in Spanish with or do other things. But I think Federico would agree that even the most Spanish dominant of Hispanic in the United States is not expecting that everything they buy caters to them, right? And at the same time, we're living in multi-generational households. So you have 7-year-olds translating at Home Depot to buy a washing machine. There is always going to be a little bit of risk. There may be some Hispanics who won't buy because they're turned off by that. Why aren't they talking to me? But I think in general, 90%, 95% of what gets advertised is in English only.
And Marcelino, I mentioned that Hispanics give a lot of credit to companies and brands that try. Yeah. Because look, ultimately, we didn't mean to scare you like, you have to be perfect and speak Spanish fluidly. No, but again, you have to make an effort. But the reality is, even when we're not a monolith, we're all, as Hispanics, are in what I call a bicultural journey, right? Because we're part of two worlds that collide, and we're like in different places. Like there are some people that maybe first-generation immigrants that are more close still to like our countries of origin, and some that are second, third generation that are much closer to like mainstream culture and people in between. But we all recognize that we're in a country that speaks English, and like we have to adapt to some degree to that. So that's reality, and we accept it and we embrace it, and that's why again some of us decided to leave our countries and came to this country. So it's not like we're expecting that everybody's going to cater to our every single need, perfectly no. But it just a little bit of effort goes a long way, right? And I think as everybody said, we can also help you identify like major pitfalls that you have to be aware of.
Yeah, the bigger risk is not doing anything.
But that's an important point, right? So we don't want to make it sound like it's difficult to advertise to Hispanics because it's not, right? We all Americanize. Right? To very large extents. And we're all very forgiving in how we respond to brands. So I think that the key thing here is don't be afraid, try, learn, and then iterate on that. It's not a difficult market to approach, I would say, right?
No, and I think what we're trying to say is there's an enthusiasm behind the Hispanic consumer, and so when the Hispanic consumer feels that they're being catered to, that's where we see the lift. But I don't think it's a difficult thing, right?
No.
We want to be seen, we want to be acknowledged, and I think that's it.
I don't know if you've seen Burger King's recent ads. And they have this "You Rule" slogan, right, that they use for all the commercials. And so I remember the first time that I saw the "You Rule," I was like, how are they translating that? How are they going to say it? Like, "Yo mando," like, how are they going to say it? Like in the ads, right, with the song. And then I saw a commercial in Spanish, and the commercial was in Spanish, but at the end it was "You Rule," right? And you rule. And we are learning that we rule, right? And some may have to ask what exactly that means. Like, but once we know that we rule, right? Your rule. And so again, brands don't have to lose their identity in order to also cater to Hispanics or even in Spanish. They can, again, the dialogue was in Spanish, but then the jingle and the slogan was in English because that represents the brand. That's important for the brand.
And don't be afraid to use Spanglish.
Yeah.
Like literally,
We all
right?
use
like,
it.
We all use it.
Live más Taco Bell. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't get more Spanglish than
That's
that, right?
Yeah, we use the concept of enculturate. You just need to enculturate a little bit. You don't need to lose your identity. You don't need to lose all of your brand values. You need to just roll out the welcome mat with a little enculturation in your messaging, in your service, in your back end, wherever you can. Greg?
In the past, we always used to say that you maybe dip your toe in before you dive in. But having said that, could you kind of give a map as to where's the best places, how's the best way to dip your toe in when you start as opposed to before you dive in? You know, how would you do it?
I'm still a little old school. Fire a shotgun, whether it be national or regional, fire the shotgun, see what clicks, see what sparks, and then optimize. I think in terms of linear. Now in terms of CTV and digital, you can be a lot more targeted, particularly if your client already has, a Facebook following, you can profile, you can persona. There's a lot of things that you can do. But generally, I think you need a shotgun focused on the Hispanic market, see what fires, and then dive deep.
Or you can also dip the toes in other ways, right? Like, look, maybe you want to start giving your customers some options on the website. Put a toggle, English, Spanish, right? See what kind of usage you get there. Set up a drip campaign in Spanish, see kind of what open rates you're getting there, right? That's easy, that's not expensive, right? Then you start getting some level of comfort. Try search. You're at the bottom of the funnel, less risk, then start moving your way up of the funnel as you get more comfortable, right? So there's multiple ways to dip your toes and get payoff on a risk-adjusted basis.
Thank you. Wonderful job, guys.
Thank you.